Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to start with quoting a certain article that was published by one of our fellow Rethinking Economics students during the FISMAS 4 era. It was in the Mail and Guardian. The name of the article was Rethinking Economics for Africa is a Duty. And in this article, he recites a student who has done an economics degree, and after the economics degree, he goes into the working world, and he asks himself, how do I fix the real problems of my society, right? He recognizes that in South Africa, you face high rates of unemployment. He recognizes that there's high levels of poverty. He recognizes that there's high levels of inequality. He also recognizes that South Africa represents a rich history, a violent history of colonialism, of apartheid, and how that has actually seeped into the post-apartheid era, if there is any of such things, right? And he recites from his textbooks. He recognizes that his textbooks are mostly from Western scholars, Harvard scholars such as Menkiv, who have told him that all he has to do is to look at certain models, the Solo models, the HR models, Harold and Doma, and he also notices that all these names are white names of white male names who have these particular models in the Western world that say that they are going to fix his problems. But then he realizes that all the models that he has done, all the mathematical equations that he has done, all the multiple choice questions that he has answered can never fix the issues that Africa faces. He also questions, why is there no African person in my economics textbook? Why do I hear of the great economic policies that Roosevelt put up front during the Great Depression? Yet I have never heard of people like Thomas Sankara, who implemented certain policies which elevated poverty, which contributed to the health of many people in Burkina Faso. That was before he was assassinated, of course. He was taught that the private sector, the companies, would actually lead to growth in his country. But he also remembers that during colonialism, at the forefront were the very same companies were in the forefront of slavery of his ancestors. So these are the many issues that led to the creation of this society. During the FISMAS 4 era, many students from different strides questioned their education curriculum, and they questioned their lecturers on why do I not learn of the African thinkers, the African men and women who have contributed to this economics ideas. He questions why he doesn't learn of any history with regards to Africa. He's done international economics, he's learned about mercantilism, about how Britain implemented mercantilism, but he's never learned of anything, any type of history about Africa, any economic history about Africa. So how can he fix the issues of Africa when he doesn't even know the history of Africa itself? So Rethinking Economics is basically a group of students who got Rethinking Economics for Africa in context. We started out as Rethinking Economics, which is a global society that aims to make economics a more pluralistic undertaking. So, for example, we include schools of thought such as feminist economics, Pan-Africanism. We include institutionalist economics because many students say that we only learn of the neoclassical models which do not fix the issues that we face. So this society was bred out of those questions that students were asking many scholars, and indeed many scholars partake. And it is said that as we look at our universities, we see that many departments are getting into this idea of including Africa in their curriculum. We see that in the humanities, we see that even in the natural of the sciences, but still is lacking in economics. So today on Africa Day, we still have to ask that question. What of Africa is why Africa still continues to be excluded within our textbooks, and how can we turn around this trajectory as students, as scholars in this university. My name is David Tinashe Nyagweta. I'm the secretary for the Rethinking Economics for Africa at Nelson Mandela University. We also contribute to the overall Rethinking Economics with regards to we've got societies in Wits, UCT, University of Pretoria, Northwest University, and other universities. And we are very excited to have pragmatic scholars who have also grappled with the same questions. And we are also very excited. I'm very excited that I can see many students' faces. I can also see lecturers, and I hope that everyone has a very informative talk. This is more of a discussion. I'm just going to hand over to Utkomisa, who's going to introduce the speakers, and then we'll take it from there.
Greetings everyone, my name is Komisa Sokupe and I'll be introducing the speakers for today. Starting off by Professor Nomalanga Mkhize is a historian based at the Nelson Mandela University in Gqeberha. She is an acting director for the School of Government and Social Sciences. Her research interests are in African languages, historical lectures, vernacular historiography, and the 19th century Eastern Cape history. She is a strong advocate for early mother tongue reading and has collaborated in developing material and developing books, and material in African languages for children. Our second speaker is Dr. Yubele, is a senior lecturer in the Department of Economics at the Nelson Mandela University. Her research and interests and expertise include economic education, training, and regional development and sports management. She continuously contributed to issues, social sciences for women in rural areas, and inclusion of African languages in areas of African languages in education, breaking ground with works as Isigaba Sezoqoqosho, economics terms and concepts made simple. Without further ado, let's welcome our first speaker, Prof. Mkhize.
Hello. Thanks. So I just need to say I've got a sinus infection. So you'll see these things, it's not COVID, I have a very bad sinus infection. Okay, thank you, and I'm so honored to be invited and to be sat next to a real and proper black economist. I'm not an economist. And I love this combination that you've set up here. Thank you so much. I just looked back and I noticed that the first time I was invited to one of the RIFA conferences, I think it was in 2019, and I went just to see what is happening, And one of the things that I said there, I think is where I will start my discussion today, because this is a very difficult topic, and universities are set up to deal with difficult questions, not with sloganeering, not with feeling offended. And on that matter, I will say something that I say to my history postgrads. That if any generation of black kids is going to grow up as constantly offended as this generation, I can tell you, you will not own a single economy. You will be overtaken by the people that don't care what people say about them, but they take what they need. Start there. We'll fight the racism as we fight it forever. But we can't be crippled by all this, oh my God, whatever you guys do with social media. So I just want to start there, because that is the beginning of anything I do now with students. And I find Mandela students are actually very robust. They can handle stuff. Whereas I don't think people at Wits can handle anything, or UCT for that matter. Because the economy is reality. The economy is material. The economy is whether or not you're going to eat or not. Okay? The economy is tough. All right? So with that in mind, at RIFA, what I said was, when are we going to have an economist who can solve the problem of Ubhara? Where are we going to solve the problem of young men standing for ages on a corner with nothing to do? Who is the target of the economist in this country? If the target of the economist in this country is not to solve Ibhara, that economist will solve nothing. Of course, the black kids were like, yeah, this is what we want to talk about, but we can't talk about it in class. And I'm like, that's because your classroom is not sharing your hard-lived reality. And it doesn't consider the hard-lived reality as the basis upon which we must theorize to solve the problem, right? And once we're dealing with hard reality, it means we're dealing with contradictions. And we're dealing with things which are so intractable that we literally have to fight about every concept and everything until we get somewhere. A friend of mine, Dr. Mabukwane, when we discuss this, we call it the sociology of standing. They stand on the corner. So when I lived with some family friends at Shorterville, and this was the thing that killed me. Not that I've never seen young men standing on corners, that's a norm. But on this day, it particularly killed me because we needed to walk from Mercantile back to Shorter, so we walked. And every single hangar we went into, there were groups of 7 or 8 young men standing during the day 11 with nothing to do. Nothing to do. Let me jump a little bit now and connect this to the problem of constantly being offended by everything. If you can't solve the problem of young men in a society, you can't solve the problems of the society. If you solve the problem of the women of that society, the society takes off. It becomes amazing if you solve the problem of the women. But if you don't solve the problem of the men, your society self-destructs. Your society collapses on the chaos and disillusionment of young men. This isn't about feminist economics. This is Umzali speaking. This is Umagazi Now tell me how that makes its way into economics. I don't want to hear feminism. What am I going to do with him? What am I going to do with this 18-year-old that's strong and big and out of control, and no one in this community can contain him? And he's not the only one. The entire community is collapsing. Start your economics there. For whom do you solve the economics question? For whom do you solve the economics problem? And what courage do you need to resolve this issue? I've got my timer here, so don't worry, I won't go beyond time. I thought a lot about what I was going to say here. I taught a course at Rhodes on the history of the corporation in South Africa, the history of the company in South Africa. You guys in economics will learn that thing as the history of mercantilism. But I teach it from a social history point of view. So I look at the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck, and in fact, we start before Jan van Riebeeck, the arrival of the English East Indies Company in the Cape, and its abduction of uXhosa, the Khoi man, right? That's now a famous story. They abduct uXhosa in 15, I forget now, and they take him overseas, and then he's unhappy, he comes back to uXhosa, and he says to his people, Jongana, I was in England, Mus. So it turns out the things that they're battering with us here, there's lots of that back home, so we gotta raise our cattle prices when these ships come by. So when black people encounter the economy, they encounter it, adapt to it, they work with it, they do what they need with it. So the story of the African economy is surely not the economy of Africans not being able to figure stuff out. But it seems to be a story of being unable to sustainably work on their economy so that they make intergenerational impact. And so my interest has been in trying to find those social questions that will help us to solve the intergenerational question. And that's why I start with the economy of ubupara. Immediately, that will bring into view many different questions. But at the center of your question is this hopeless young man. And I don't know about you, but in every black family I know of, there's at least 3 or 4 drugged out boys. Okay, so everyone's always locking away his cell phone, even rice. You have to lock it away chicken, they butter with the chicken, and then you try to get them to Sanka to say, Sanka, can you help? This is a daily struggle for black families. So if we see our realities and we see these questions, why do we find ourselves struggling to codify them into concepts, into frameworks, right? Into workable models that can help us to figure things out. And my answer to that is simply that the field of economics is literally not designed for solving the problems of Africa. It's not designed for that. And it's not permitting Africans to design and innovate on it. We don't have one of those things, but just indulge me for 1 second. If I had a pen, I would show you. There's nothing as beautiful as a, what you call that, the plane, man, you know, the XY, what you call that thing?
Yeah.
Thank you, that thing. There where there's X squared and whatever. There's nothing as beautiful as 4 quadrants to illustrate relations between things. The question is, who is the one determining the construct of what relationships are being determined? I'm saying I want to see a relationship between whatever variable here and factor here that is relevant to my community.
Yes.
So I work with Professor Mbatha in Rhodes. I must actually circulate that paper. It's just the beginning of a thinking paper. And we were thinking hard about how do we really understand a municipality, for example. That means I ask, if you want to really understand a municipality, it's not merely what government is putting in, all of that. What I would want to see in a municipality is, what is the condition of life for umakhulu up? And what determines the conditions of life for umakhulu, right? And how do I construct a whole paradigm about what is Makhulu's life like here? How do I look at black property relations in this place in relation to if there's a white town? How do I look at all these aspects which are every day in front of me, but aren't easily abstracted in terms of how economies do it? So we sat down and we just decided we want to create a model here because there's other things you need to factor for. So if I need to factor for the culture of tenderpreneurship, all of Durban is a tenderpreneurial economy. All of it. The entire thing circulates on procurement. If you're going to try and understand the black economy of KZN outside of that, you're not doing yourself any favors. So you look at this thing and you say, okay, no, and then you start to work things out. So that for me seems to be what's missing in economics, but it's not just in economics, it's in sociology, it's in history, it's everywhere, which leads to what you were saying about fees must fall. Let me just move to the next point now. The other thing that's the struggle here is that Africans have failed in general. We have failed ourselves in our own independence, therefore we don't trust what we have done. I grew up in 3 African countries. right? So here, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, 3 countries. And what is apparent to me is every single African country pretty much tends to follow the same pattern to failure, right? And what seems to happen is that almost at every point, Africans just almost give up on their country for whatever reasons, danger, whatever. But it seems to me that in spite of all of that, and in spite even of the harsh things that happen, Africans continue to have hope that somewhere, somehow, someone in Africa is going to find the solution. We still seem to have this hope. So I want to talk about this hope in the context of understanding that the textbooks are not interested in IPARA except as a criminal factor. They're not interested in uMakhulu except she must get a social grant, all right? They're not interested in the woman in this house who's omdala, who's got high blood pressure because she's dealing with her brother Olipara. They're not factoring all those things in the way that you instinctively understand as a black person. And so it seems to me then that what economists should be doing is finding those constructs of hope that Africans seem to hold on to in spite of 60 years of failure. South Africa, we are the last born, so our failure is beginning now, and we just need to be aware of that. But we hope we won't fail, but we can see the same pattern unfolding. But we can think about what are the things that have worked for Africans through time. So let me try and talk about those things based on living in 3 African countries, or growing up in 3 countries. The first is that it's universal across the African continent that hardship breeds innovation. Difficulty has tended to produce better Africans than independence. It's a fact. My parents, and I know this is the whole, I used to walk to school. Actually, it turns out walking to school makes you a better person, except for the outcomes of what happens when the state is failing with that. But my point is this: complacency and indulgence and our tendency for soft life is the biggest problem we're going to face. Because what produced a more resilient generation of Africans, our parents, our grandparents, was the context, actually, ironically, of being under oppression. Now, am I saying that what we need, therefore, is to be oppressed? No. What I'm saying is it is a human fact that struggle produces better humans. Not poverty, not you starving, but the aptitude of needing to work up against something actually produces a better person. Why am I saying this? We've created an expectation, and I don't mean this in the welfarist way, so please don't think of the Americans and, oh my God, welfare. We need social grants in this country. We've created, though, an expectation that under conditions of freedom, there's no need for us to have a thing up against which we test ourselves. And I think it's a natural human problem that when you are relatively free, you relatively tend to not do as much as you should to deal with the problem. And I know it's going to be controversial, but I'm done with all that nonsense, because the second problem we face here is being distracted by social media. Anyway, that's a story for another day. So hardship, even if it's contrived, requires hard, high standards. I want to talk about this in the context of education, so you understand what I mean. I wrote an article years ago about how the education system currently has 0 expectations of you. It has 0 expectations of black students in particular. What the education system is designed to do in this country and in others is to amass all of you in the room, get government to pay, keep me in a job, and I pass you on, I lower my requirements, you pass, and if I don't pass you, maybe you'll send the SRC or whatever, depending on what's going on. And sometimes it's fair, the SRC needs to come. But generally the system says, push them on, push them on. And what that does, of course, is it means what we've done is we've created a system of just de-skilling black youth in general. So we're finding that black youth are less capable, less skilled, less analytical, unable to open a book and sustain to read it, reliant more and more on whether they're going to, get someone in the class to plagiarize okay? There's this thing that students are doing these days. And what is interesting is there's divisions as to how that happens. At the top level, you get science students who generally now, and it's a class division and it's now a disciplinary division. You're going to get science students because it's science, it's more technical, they'll have to work a bit harder. Then you get to get your commerce students and they'll have to work a little bit harder. Then the mass of everyone else is in the humanities, whereby we don't even bother anymore because the students just think it's all about making opinions. So we've lost the rigor. And I've analyzed all of this and looked at it and thought to myself, how do we then create artificial hardships or artificial systems against which young blacks can recreate conditions that allow them to test their best selves against them? Because those are the conditions under which you begin to be expected to have skill, to think on your feet, to be innovative. And one of the ways to do it, quite simply, is to have black adults in the room who just expect more from you. We just expect more from you. We just expect you to not be offended. We just expect you to get on with the business of it. Because at the heart of it, most of what education is a psychological game that you play with the child, that you play with the student to say, can you stand up and solve a problem? And once we start doing that and we start creating these, I would call them artificial ecosystems of challenge, what we then can get is a student who can actually be far more confident, more insightful, more challenging, more competitive against others. And I think that kind of ecosystem then allows us to be able to then get up on the world stage and say, here is the dissertation on the problem of Amapara in South Africa and the model of youth intervention and development in a community. If you solve that problem and you have the confidence to solve your context, then you can stand up and you can deal with whoever the white guy is that is doing that stuff, because you've got the sense that you've been expected to struggle with the concepts and struggle with ideas. Then you have a much stronger chance to be able to advance new ideas. So let me conclude by saying my argument here is about what kind of graduates are we going to need, what kinds of approaches to education are we going to need to create the potential for these. I can describe the problems from here to forever. I could have sat here and done the talk on how South Africa became a white monopoly capital. You know that, there's no point. I can also sit here and tell you that Africans had vibrant economies before white people. Surely you know that. Surely you know that at Mapungubwe they had cotton. Surely you know that we've been copper mining. Surely you know your ancestors had all those things. That's not the question now. The question is what to do about you now. And so I think and there's Thomas sitting there, and maybe there's Menatis, he can affirm this, that our main challenge is to recreate artificial challenges in our current conditions of democracy and our current conditions of independence. One of the problems that we'll have to solve is the problem of SADC. We'll have to solve all these problems, but outside of the ability to really stand and be able to say to a UCT graduate, yeah, that's interesting economics you did there, but did you know how the economy of black women works when they have to deal with coming home to cook and still get up in the morning and then be harangued by the drunk brother who comes home? Do you know that economy? Because that's the economy of the majority. That's the economy you must be able to describe. And that's not an economy that you're going to treat as
that's going to make the white people feel embarrassed about us. We're going to be embarrassing ourselves. We will not be embarrassing ourselves because we'll be describing our conditions with the rigor that we need, with the standards that we need, and with the complexity that is required on that quadratic plane. So I'm going to stop there and leave the rest for discussion.
I think I need that. Oh.